the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Stephen Molyneux.
Hi, and welcome to what's now our third season of the Arabian Racehorse Podcast. I'm joined, as usual, by Stephen Molyneux from Dubai. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Actually, we're not quite Dubai weather here, but at least it's not raining, and I don't feel like I need to wear a jumper for once. You've had quite an interesting winter. You've left Dubai Racing Channel, and you are now the Arabian handicapper for the Emirates, I understand.
Yeah, first season done, still alive, and all that. So it's very hard to I suppose, quantify how well you've done. If, well, you know, one person's good fortune is another. You know, people will complain on the other side. So I think it's gone reasonably well. We tried to implement a few things. Probably coincided with a time when the horse population skyrocketed in the UAE, in contrast to the UK, unfortunately. But so yeah, it was a bit difficult at times. A lot of horses were missing out on races, and there was always going to be sort of a readjustment level given what I did to all the handicap ratings at the start of the season. But I think it went fairly well, and hopefully onwards and upwards this year.
And I think going back to the adjustment of the handicap ratings, that was pretty much universally accepted out there, wasn't it? Just to recap for the viewers.
Yeah. So basically everything at the lower end went up £25 to a scale that was far more in keeping with what we'd become accustomed to in England, France, Qatar, Saudi. I didn't have one complaint really about that. I think everybody quite enjoyed the fact that their horse was rated a lot higher. Maidens obviously were rated higher as the season went on as well to try and compensate for that. But one thing I didn't really legislate for was the huge number of new horses. I think there was about 150, 200 extra horses this year compared to the year before, which made it difficult, horses getting into races and what have you. But I think people hopefully saw the bigger picture. And I think the bit that pleased me the most, and one of the main aims, was to sort of bridge that gap between horses winning maidens and handicaps and getting into the group races. Saw it a couple of years ago, you know, you looked at horses like AF Al Wajal, who were rated 75 1 minute and then running in a Group 1 the next. That I felt that gap was well bridged, and horses like Adrad Athbar, who went on to win a Group 1 at Abu Dhabi, you know, maybe in years gone by that horse, for example, wouldn't have been able to run in a Group 1 because its rating was too low. So I think it helped on that score, and maybe it's only going to be over the next 2 or 3 years where it really does see the benefit.
And just a little aside to that, obviously we had what used to be commonplace and has now become slightly more rare, which is a UK horse going over to race in the UAE, which of course was Al Mahbouba, who'd done very well in her last couple of starts in the UK and ended up winning the Al Ain Marathon Series.
Shows the potential for having horses in the UK doing well, going over to the UAE. They obviously gave her a bit of a break. She ran at Abu Dhabi before she went to Al Ain, but she was off probably about a couple of months before she ran that first race. So yeah, there's chances to run in the UK, have a bit of a break and go well in the UAE.
And that's certainly something that I think that, you know, on the bigger picture, we should look at, or other people coming into the sport should look at. I dropped in to see Doug Watson and Al Mahbouba when I was out in Dubai for the Dubai World Cup. And we'll just watch what Doug has got to say about his experience with Al Mahbouba now. So Al Mahbouba has come over from England, and she's had a fantastic run of form out here and won the Al Ain Marathon Series. Can you tell me a bit about the whole journey with her?
Justin called me and said they were going to send something out for the marathon series. I didn't know how he picked that out, but he and James made a great choice, and we got her, and she's been so easy to deal with since we got her. It took a while for her coat to come around, but you know, we ran her in Abu Dhabi to get a race in her before the series started, and she just kept surprising us all the time. Not surprising Justin and James, just us. She works like a proper Arabian racehorse. I thought she'd be better over a mile than 2, but they were right, and she's just done everything right since she's been here. So it's nice to have a quality Arabian again. We haven't had any in a few years, and it was just nice to see her do what she did. I got really excited on that last race and how she dug in there at the end. So she's been a superstar for us.
And that was a real weight-carrying performance as well, under 60
kilos. I mean, as you can see, she probably only weighs 400, so that's a lot of weight to have on your back. And I thought Pat gave her a great, confident ride, and she came through for us in the end.
And there's a nice little twist we were just saying earlier with her breeding, in that obviously you're involved with Al Saudi, her dam sire.
Yeah, and so her sire beat us in the Kahela Classic. We had Al Saudi. It was his second run for us, and Willie Supple got the run up the inside and beat us, but it's pretty neat that she's by Majani out of Al Saudi there, and so when she came, I noticed that first straight off, and she's just a really, really tough animal. So hopefully see what happens with her career after this, but the goal they set out for was met. So she did an amazing job doing it.
So clearly she was a bit of a yard favourite there as well. I think Doug was quite attached to her in the end, and I believe that if she hasn't been sold, she's still up for sale as we speak when we're recording this. Obviously, the big news for UK Arabian racing since we last did a podcast is Arrow has been sold to ARH, thereby securing our future for, let's hope, the foreseeable. What are your thoughts on that, Stephen?
Yeah, it can only be a positive, really, to have backing behind ARO, obviously racecourse owners. So they're obviously going to be very happy to see plenty of Arabian races on their tracks, and it just gives an extra layer to it all, I suppose, management level, on the ground level, and hopefully, as you say, it can be a case of onwards and upwards in the future. So yeah, definitely good news for the sport, and maybe they can drive ownership as well and get more horses in, which is of course what we need at the end of the day.
We certainly do. Numbers certainly are down this year, and one would hope that this would give existing owners, past owners and new owners the impetus to feel that it's worth investing. I mean, one thing that is an immediate bonus for us is, of course, that we will get coverage on Sky Sports, and so it's a moving forward and a further integration and acceptance within British flat racing that Arrow will face now.
Yeah, I think being on the TV is obviously huge, isn't it? Prize money's, I think prize money's good as it is already, considering the sort of level that we're talking at. We're obviously very lucky to have the sponsorship, and the sponsors need to see the races on the TV. So if ARC can push that forward, then that's definitely one early tick, and hopefully, we can keep on moving forward.
And another part of bringing our racing to a wider audience, of course, is betting. Whether you bet or not, it's still a huge part of things. And that's one reason why this season that we've actually gone to 72-hour declarations, for anyone who was wondering why we seem to be doing everything a day earlier, certainly on the Arrow website, because we're not part of the current digital system, which goes through Weatherby's and informs the press association and the betting sites of our runners. So this is hopefully just a temporary measure and just for this season. And we should see, our form and our cards on all the betting sites that are common on the internet and on television and so on.
Yeah, well, otherwise people are just effectively betting on flies up a wall, really, aren't they? Obviously, the Racing Post carries a lot of the form on the website, but nowadays in this sort of era, people want everything in the one place, don't they? So if they see that on the various betting websites, then that can only help.
Absolutely. And we'll just our partner in our podcast, of course, is Equine Medirecord. They've been all over. I caught up with them in Saudi when they were doing work on the Saudi Cup. They've also been out to America this week at the weekend for the Preakness Stakes at Baltimore, which of course hosts America's most valuable Grade 1 race for Arabians, which is the American leg of the UAE President's Cup. Did you catch sight of Diamond Gem winning that race?
I I have seen a replay actually. Yeah, there was a horse in second that sort of perked my interest, given that horse used to race in the UAE, RB Texas Hold'em. It's obviously a race with rich tradition that's produced one or two horses that have gone on to bigger and better things elsewhere. So yeah, always a race worth keeping an eye on. And I think he went to the expected winner, was it? Or certainly the least exposed horse, or the youngest horse in the race. So yeah, maybe we'll see one or two of those on an international scale in the coming years.
Yeah, and certainly on pedigree, yet another win for the sire Burning Sand, who seems to be certainly preeminent in America these days. And Pierce was out there, and he made this short little video to join in with us today.
Well, welcome everyone here to Pimlico Racecourse here in Maryland.
And now we'll look ahead to the first race of the season. It's really great to be back and underway at long last. We're going to Bath, which is pretty much my nearest racecourse, so that's not too much of a journey for me, I have to say, on a selfish level. Bath, we've got a 1.25 mile handicap. It's a 0 to 60, and we've got a very pleasing amount of 10 runners for the race. What stands out for you in this race so far, Stephen?
Well, it's obviously some familiar faces in there, which we come to expect. I don't think too many racecourses are going to play host to a 14-year-old running, for example, in the form of Aldra here. But a nice mix of horses that are on the other end of the scale as well. Mayfair, for example, 10 years his junior. So yeah, there's a potential improvers in there, the established horses, which is what we've come to expect. And yeah, good start to the season, as you say. Slightly delayed, but having a good number of runners in 10 that are likely to go to post. So James Owen is well adept at getting horses ready first time out. So your eye is immediately drawn to his runners, and it's the aforementioned Mayfair really who will probably go off favourite. She's only had the 3 starts. All of those were in what you would call good level races, certainly one compared to the one that she's going to run in at Bath. I suppose the only concern with her would be that she's a 4-year-old and she's going to have to carry quite a bit of weight in the circumstances, but at least it's on ground that's going to be on the quick side. I suppose the benefit of having the season start now is that these Arabians aren't running on very soft ground that likely would have prevailed 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one negative for her, for me, is the fact that she, not all first foals are small, but she is a first foal, and she is very much on the small side. One would expect her to have strengthened up over the winter, and I'm sure she has, and I'm sure James has done plenty of work with her. She's got Rhea Betts, who takes off 7 from that 10 stone 4 burden that she's got to carry, so that's certainly going to help. Rhea obviously works at the yard and will be familiar with riding her. The Dam won over this trip and further in a slightly lower grade. The step up in trip on a handicap debut is certainly going to help, I would think. So yeah, I mean, she may be favourite or very close to it, I would think, on the day.
Yeah, I think so. They'll run behind Lejane. I know she was beaten a long way in the end behind Lejane last time at Windsor, but Alma Buba was in second that day. The aforementioned Alma Buba, Zakeda Zayn was just behind her, and she finished ahead of some, for that level at least at Windsor, some reasonably good horses. So yeah, she just looks your stereotypical second season improver really, and yeah, the big weight is pretty much the only minor concern. But as you've quite rightly pointed out, her jockey is going to at least take a bit of that off.
Yeah, and Rhea's only had 3 rides, and she's won and been placed twice. So for all the fact that some people might be put off by her lack of experience, clearly she gets on well with the horses from the yard.
Yeah, she'll have, I'm sure, ridden the horse in the morning as well. So, you needn't be too concerned about the jockey. We do point towards professionals in this type of race at various points throughout the season, but definitely a help having that £7 taken off here.
Yeah, and of James's other 2, before we go through the rest of the card, we've got Upstart Crow, who has missed a season and is back now under new ownership and has joined James. I don't think anyone should be overly concerned by the season missed. It wasn't missed through injury. It was just an ownership decision to perhaps give him some time off, and now he's been sold on. So he's got £7 off from another claimer, I think, who I believe is having a first ride, certainly under Arrow rules. He sports a hood, which he wore on his last start, so nothing new from there. But he looks certain to have probably come on for a year off, and having had the 3 runs, he'll know what it's all about. And if he's strengthened, the rider's got a claim, he could be off quite a nice mark.
Yeah, he's had those 2 starts in handicaps, hasn't he? But at the same time, very difficult to assess. We, of course, back in 2021, wasn't it? We were giving horses a mark after 1 run, which we will be reverting to this season as well as it goes. So, yeah, he was difficult to assess. I'd imagine with most Arabians, really, they take 2 or 3 goes in handicaps to sort of not necessarily find their level, but just gain the necessary experience. So that would be the case with this horse. He was beaten an awful long way in all of those 3 starts, but he is now dropping in grades, joined a yard that, as you say, gets them ready first time. So you'd hope, or certainly connections would hope, that he is going to show a lot more on this reappearance. And
the dam was pretty useful, and she's produced 2 winners so far, both by different sires. One was a 3-time winner at this trip, who was by Majani, that Phil trained. And the other was a multiple winner over shorter, Jowdy Cairo, who I briefly had a share in when he was syndicated. And he won a Group 3 over 1,700 metres in Sweden. So there's plenty of good form on pedigree there. And although Al Jakbar often gets a bit of a bad rap, having gone through the stats, he actually has a 50% strike rate to runners to winners in the UK. So he's had pretty limited opportunities, and that's not a bad figure at all.
No, that's a good stat. And as you say, the dam has produced a couple of useful winners already. So it's a very good family that John Elliott has bred, and crucially as well, probably all around 1.25 miles. So the trip's definitely going to be in the favour of Upstart Crow, you'd imagine. And it could be a shrewd little purchase with the James Owen yard this year. He's starting off a low enough mark. So he's it's hard to, I suppose, ascertain just which of the 3 is his number 1, really, because he certainly couldn't rule out Heritage Valentino. A little bit in and out last year, sort of all or nothing rather than in and out. Did need his first 2 starts of the season before he found his form, culminating in a victory at Wolverhampton. Any one of those 3, really, you'd be mildly interested in, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's as we said earlier, with 72-hour declarations, and we are doing it just after that point. There is scope, obviously, for the jockey bookings to change, but at this stage, Kieran O'Neill has been jocked up, and of course he won on him at Wolverhampton, and also rode him again when he was 4th behind Al Mahbouba. Notice that the one thing that I would note, though, is that the 3 runs where he either won or was placed and finished 4th, he was wearing either blinkers or a hood or cheek pieces. And the other runs, the other 4 runs that he had, 2 last year and 2 the year before, where he didn't make much of a running at all, he was without any headgear. So that's possibly a negative, or he might just have grown up enough not to need the headgear.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to, I suppose, quantify, isn't it? Just what, but it does all point to him perhaps needing that headgear. So out of the 3, might just need the run in that respect. But he's experienced. He's got plenty of experience under his belt. Trip fine, quickish ground shouldn't be a problem as well. So I suppose, looking at his profile and the fact that he is literally all or nothing, that is where the headgear could come in. I wouldn't say he drops the lot if he's taken on or sulking or whatever, but I suppose when you marry the 2 up, it could be that the headgear does focus his attention when it's applied.
And of course, he has beaten pretty much all the horses in the race. The one horse that he does have form with, of course, is Aloof, who has also beaten him by a head when they raced at Chepstow on the turf. She's actually £1 better off, albeit that it's a different trip this time. So it will be interesting to see how those two compare. Meeting again back on turf this time. Aloof will be stepping up in trip, but her sire, Seraphine de Pen, obviously you'll know from as a Cahala Classic winner. So clearly, from that side of things, that she should get the trip all right. I spoke to Steve during the week. He's very pleased with her. Cautiously optimistic, I think, is probably where he's at. At the moment, she's got David Probert on board. Obviously, a lot of people in the UK will be aware that David got a rather nasty kick in the paddock at Windsor last night. According to his Twitter feed, the X-rays were clear and he's just bruised. So hopefully he'll be fine and on board when we get to Friday.
Yeah, and I think the jockey booking could be fairly crucial for this horse, Aloof, who is a slow burner in her career, and she's a slow burner in her races as well, because those 2 wins last year almost came against the odds, didn't they? On both occasions, she was behind, and I wouldn't say her task was completely hopeless, but it didn't look good for much of the way, and she really came home strongly. And on that evidence, 7 furlongs and a mile, the 2 distances that she won over, would be on the sharp side, and that she would have no problem with this 1.25 miles. She was beaten over it on her final start, but I just wonder whether she might be more of a turf horse.
Steve did say that he felt between the race she won and the Wolverhampton race that he'd probably done a little bit too much work with her. She's very much she's not been the easiest horse to train, and he feels that very much in the mould of her dam, who was similarly difficult. But he said he really feels that the penny has dropped with her over the winter. And he said, look, at home, she's doing everything right. As we know, that doesn't always translate to the same performance on the race course, but he certainly feels that she's turned a corner. And I mean, one of the problems she had last year, she was often, as you alluded to, slowly away from the gates. And he was saying now she jumps off and goes straight on the bridle now. So hopefully, if she can continue that vein of form when she gets onto the racecourse in public, then she should have a strong chance.
Yep, she should. And then if she's ever on the all-weather again, then what you said would hopefully mean that she's got no issue with the surface. But she's, she really, as you say, found her feet last year, and I guess had the season continued, then she would have got back on the up following that defeat at Wolverhampton, and certainly of interest in this race.
And another one of interest for me, who I have been to see actually at exercise prior to the season starting, is Al Hattab for Peter Hammersley and Julie Kelway, the breeder. Obviously, at the moment, again, another attractive jockey booking in the rising star Billy Loughnane at the moment. He looked a much stronger, leaner, fitter individual than certainly last year, and Pete's certainly do have a tendency to come on in their second season. And all right, I know he's slightly older than Mayfair, but certainly, I mean, he looked a much more impressive individual, and certainly seemed to be enjoying his work a lot more. And no disrespect to Paddy, who rode him in his 3 races last year. I think he's certainly a horse that looked like he would benefit from a ride from a professional, someone who was riding in races on a regular basis.
It'd be interesting if Billy does ride him, because then we'll almost have a horse older than one of the jockeys, because he's only 17, isn't he, with Al Jua here 14. But I mean, look, very hard to assess form-wise. Only beaten 1 horse home in 3 starts, but everything you've said about him improving second season. Altes Cossack, his dam was a serial winner in handicaps, and we know Pete Hammersley's style is to bring them along steadily, perhaps to the point that the run may even be needed on this first outing. But everything points to him showing a lot more this season.
Yeah, I certainly think he's going to leave last year's form behind, even if he doesn't win on this occasion. Pete's also got Belle Angelique in the race, another one who she really has taken her time, but she had a few little niggles and training problems, so she can be slightly excused. Certainly her best career start was her last effort, her last start when she had first time visor applied. which is retained here. So she was fourth behind Heritage Valentino, Al Jawahir and Kayak over this trip. She'll probably need this race. I've seen her. I'd say she's a little on the tubby side. And, you know, whilst possibly that is just her a little bit, I certainly think the run will bring her on.
Yeah, again, last year, if the season had continued, you'd have hoped that Wolverhampton run would have preempted her improving a little bit. She dropped to the basement mark of 40, but that was a good run at Wolverhampton. And yeah, she'll hopefully improve again this year as a 7-year-old.
And one, actually, to go back to Steve, of course, you've been talking about the 14-year-old Al Jawahir, or Alan, as he's known to his friends. For all his age, you know, he was placed every start last year over from 7 furlongs to 2 miles. I mean, you have to say he's a little bit of a favourite of mine, really. He's a character, and he does what he wants to do. He'll certainly be fit enough, and who knows, he might make the frame yet again.
Well, he pretty much should do, really, on profile, and as long as he's still got the enthusiasm now that he's turned 14. But yeah, a bit of a handicapper's dream last year, really. He was always involved in the finish, rarely beaten too far over a variety of trips. I suppose the will to win question mark has to hang over him a little bit, but I don't really want to be too critical of him. And yeah, absolutely no reason why he won't be in the first 3 again on Saturday.
Yeah, and he retains a partnership with Lewis Saunders. Steve's very keen to use Al Jawahir as a horse for young riders to bring them on, and so he's got Lewis Saunders, the amateur, claiming 7. But he said also this year he's gonna split his rides between Lewis and Cameron Isles, who's a conditional. He has a bit of a connection with Cameron. He knows Cameron's dad, so that's Steve doing his little bit for bringing young jockeys along. We've also got Zakada Zayin in the race. She's another horse who's entitled to improve for having a season's run under her belt.
Yeah, again, similar comments really applying to her compared to Al Hattab. She's obviously a little bit more experienced, having had those 5 starts last year. Rarely threatened a victory, was behind several of today's rivals, both at Wolverhampton in September and Windsor in August. Again, we know how Paul Simmons operates, and he likes to bring his horses along steadily. So she's likely to improve this year. Yeah, definitely. I see her involved at some point. Again, maybe not this time, but further down the line, hopefully she'll show more of what she's about.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the one positive in her favour was coming back onto turf. Her best performance, as in when she finished closest to the winner, was when she raced over a mile on quick turf in that rather hot novice on a second start. So she was only a short head behind Mayfair on that occasion. So being able to reproduce that sort of form might show her to a better effect here, back on the turf.
Yeah, and she's had big weights as well the last twice. The last thrice actually, ever since she's gone into handicaps. She's been running in 0 to 60s and carrying sort of the best part of 10 stone and in that novice event last time. So having a bit of weight relief will help her as well, I think, first time out. And
another horse who's seems to be knocking on the door for ages, of course, is Kayak, who's partnered by Serena Brotherton again this year. He wasn't far off Heritage and Valentino and Al Jawahir when they raced over this trip to Peter on his seasonal return last year. So not inconceivable that in that same vein of form he might get there, although another year older and still a maiden.
Yeah, he is. Placed, I think, 3 times, wasn't it, the year before that? So yeah, last year just that one good run, but it was first time out, so maybe first time's a good time to catch this horse. But yeah, 9 years old, maybe needs to drop sort of it back to the mid-40s before he'll be a bigger threat. Probably a bit of a victim for finishing second or third a couple of times, is that his mark maybe didn't come down as quickly as it would with some others. But yeah, good to see him back, and hopefully he can show up under conditions that will suit him.
And last but not least, we've got Mulan and Caitlin Robinson, the true amateur owner trainer situation in this race. Obviously, it's a much higher grade than the 2 wins that he had a couple of years ago, and they were over a mile and 5. So not certain to suit, almost certainly going to need the run. But sporting connections. Well done for turning up, really.
Yeah, no, 2018 for those 2 wins. Obviously had prolonged periods off the track since then. 3 starts last year didn't really reveal too much, but they were in grades of races that he would have struggled, particularly at Haydock in a Group 3. But this might be more his level for all that he is down off a basement mark, and hopefully can give them some optimism for the rest of the season.
And that concludes our race review for the time being. We look forward to catching up with you when we've had the results, and then we'll be looking forward to our first conditions race of the year at Doncaster. So thanks, Stephen. Thanks for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.